But I've run out of dehydrated spaghetti bolognese meals, so I'm going to need to cook some more. So I thought while I'm doing it, I may as well just show you how it's all done. So I just want to say as well, if this is the first time you've ever seen my channel, this is actually an outdoor channel, and these dehydrated meals are specifically for when I do wild camps and things like that. If you're a subscriber and you are wondering why the absolute shit I'm doing cooking all of a sudden, like I just mentioned, it's basically because this is what I use for most of my wild camps. So I've had a few people ask me about them, and I thought I may as well record it while I'm cooking myself some anyway. So there you go. So you're going to need the ingredients for spaghetti bolognese, but lots of it. And obviously you'll also need a dehydrator. Now when I first started doing this, I used a cheap dehydrator, and honestly they're more trouble than they're worth. So if this is something that you're interested in doing, I do suggest just getting yourself a decent one. Excalibur are probably the best. They are really expensive, but they're very handy to have. And if you do a lot of camping, then they are really good for dehydrated meals, but also for like kind of drying fruit and things like that anyway. So the dehydrator that I use can do 9 meals at once. So obviously you'll just need to amend the ingredients depending on how many your dehydrator can handle. I'm not going to go through like kind of how much of everything you need, because basically I just change it every time I cook. I just whack whatever I want in the pan. I don't really follow recipes or anything like that. So the main ingredients that you're going to need are some minced beef. I would suggest getting the leanest you can because you need to drain all of the fat. I'll explain that later. Some spaghetti. You may as well get some half decent spaghetti. Italian seasoning. You're going to need quite a lot of that. Oxo cubes, you don't really need them, but I like to add them. Gravy granules, same again, you don't really need them. I add white wine to my spaghetti bolognese. I think you're supposed to use red, but I don't really care. I like white wine in it. It just adds that little bit of a zing. I also add grated hard cheese to my spaghetti bolognese that I'm going to dehydrate. It just makes it a little bit stronger and a bit more flavorful, which is what you want. Some garlic puree. This is optional. It does add to the flavour, but it might make your tent smell a little bit over the night. You're going to need an absolute shite load of chopped tomatoes. So I've just got the cheap ones there. There's no real point in splashing out and getting expensive ones because you're going to be cooking it, dehydrating it, and then rehydrating it. So you're going to need quite a lot of frozen diced onions. Now the idea here is that you're going to want everything chopped really finely, because the bigger you have it, the harder it's going to be to rehydrate. And that can be a bit of a pain in the arse when you're out there camping. Okay, so you're going to need a fairly large pan for this, depending on how many meals your dehydrator can cope with. So what I use this non-stick pan. It makes it a lot easier when you're frying your minced beef and all of that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cook each of these packets of mince separately and then drain them, just so that I can add them all together later on. So all I've done here is just broken up the minced beef a little tiny bit, and I'm just letting the bottom half cook. And once that's done, I'll just give it a bit of a mix around so that it starts to cook evenly. So it's not really that important that you cook this thoroughly all the way through, because it's going to cook further once it's inside the sauce anyway, and you're going to be cooking it in the sauce for maybe another 20 minutes, 30 minutes or something later on. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to drain this using a sieve, and I'll explain why while I'm doing that. So the reason why we're going to drain the fat off the mince is because when you dehydrate something, it makes all of the water evaporate, but it doesn't make the fat evaporate. And over time, the fat will actually go rancid, even though the rest of it will be fine. So that's something that we need to be careful of. Now essentially, draining this is just going to give it a much longer shelf life. It is going to take away some of the taste and some of the calories, but that's not much we can do about that. Okay, put this back in the hob. Okay, so what I tend to do is once I've done this, I just put some cold water on it and just give it a nice little drain. And you can see all of the oil come off the bottom. Okay, I'm good there. I'm just going to leave that in there. I'm just going to cook all of these packets of mince, and then we can start cracking with the sauce. I've now cooked all 3 of those packets of minced beef and drained them. So what I'm going to do is going to put them all back in the pan now. There we go. That'll do. And then just give that a little bit of a thing there. I don't really think it's that important what order you do all of this in. I tend to just whack everything in there together. What I do tend to do is I tend to put the Italian seasoning in first, and I do put a lot of this in, and when I say a lot, I mean like at least one of these. I'll probably end up putting 2 in, depending on it. One of the things that's really important to remember is when you dehydrate something, a lot of the taste goes. Essentially all we're doing is we're just making a much stronger bolognese than we would normally make, just because we know that we're going to lose some of that flavour during the process. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a little bit of this white wine. And then give this a stir, just so that it's in there, like that. Okay. Next up, I'm going to add all of the diced onions into the pan. Again, it's probably more than you ever would normally use, but we're just trying to add some flavour and a little bit of substance to the meal. So that'll do. That's the full bag there. Give that a little bit of a stir. Now I'm pretty certain that I'm actually going to end up using both of these, so I'm just going to put a little bit more in now. And I will taste it later on, just to make sure. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to start opening these cheap ass tins of chopped tomatoes, and I'm just going to plop them right in there. Now you can buy expensive tomatoes if you want, but honestly there's really no reason to, because as I said, this is all just getting dehydrated. And things like that don't really end up making much of a difference to the flavour. I would suggest getting half decent pasta, because the cheap pasta can taste a little bit chewy and doesn't rehydrate very well. So I've done this lots of times in the past with frozen mince, and it essentially just disintegrates. So once you rehydrate it, you don't really have any texture at all. It's just like a paste basically. So if you use fresh and half decent mince, then you'll get like a nice texture when you rehydrate. Let's give this a bit of a stir. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a bit more of this wine in, and most of this is going to evaporate off, just to kind of hopefully have a little bit of the taste of the wine kind of linger once it's evaporated. But also it's a lot easier to work with this when it's a little bit runny. I'm going to stick the heat on. And like I said before, it's all about making this really over the top flavours, because we know we're going to lose some of it. So we're going to use probably 2 of these purees. And then on top of the tomato puree, I'm going to add some of the garlic puree. I'm going to use half a tube, I think. Again, this is a lot more than you would normally use when you're just cooking it for yourself to eat at home, but we do need to make this over the top tasty. Okie doke, and give this a bit of a stir. And just get it going in the middle. Once you've got it mixed up a little tiny bit in the middle, and then just like kind of fold it around just so that it gets mixed up without splashing everywhere. So I'm just going to pop a lid on, and I'm just going to let this heat up and start to boil. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start chopping up this spaghetti. So like I said before, the reason why we're using frozen diced onions is just we want everything small. What we don't want to do is start putting all of this in, because it's going to be a ball ache to rehydrate. So we're going to actually cut it into like little pieces. Okay, so I'm going to do that over here. And what I've got here is an absolutely over the top large pan, which I'm going to snap the pasta into. So okay, so this stuff pings everywhere, so what I tend to do is I tend to hold it near where I'm going to snap it, and then snap it downwards like that. You don't need to worry about them being any particular size, as long as they're all roughly kind of 2, 3, 4 inches, something like that, we're good. Okay, so I'm just going to do this with both packets. and then we can fill this full of water and start boiling it. Well, I'm sure you don't want to see me snap loads of pasta, so I'll get back to you once I'm done. I mean, I'm pretty sure you know how to boil pasta, but I may as well show you as I'm doing it myself anyway. Leaky! At this point, I'm going to add some salt. And I'm going to add quite a bit as well. And give that a nice mix. So I'm just going to leave this to cook for about another 15 minutes or so, just to let the flavours kind of mix and start to come out. And then I'm going to add some OXO cubes and then some of the hard cheese as well. So it's really important not to try and add mushrooms to this, because mushrooms take a lot longer to rehydrate than everything else that's in here. So what you'll end up with is really chewy mushrooms in your bolognese, which is a bit shit, and you don't want that. Okay, we're looking good there. Just put this down onto a simmer now and give it a bit more of a stir. So I've had the lid on for a while just to get it cooking. So at this point now, we actually want the lid off, because what we want is we want this to reduce as much as possible. The runnier this is when we put it in the dehydrator, the longer it's going to take. And it takes a lot more time and electricity to reduce this down than it does if you're just doing it in the pan like this. So I'm just going to add the rest of the Italian heat seasoning. So that's just 2 full packets of Italian seasoning. This is most likely going to make about 12 meals. So what I tend to do is dehydrate the 9 that the Excalibur can do, and then I'll just eat the rest over the next few days. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add maybe about 6 OXO cubes in there. It just makes it a little bit more beefy and thickens things up a little tiny bit. Just crack open these. Give that a bit of a stir up so it doesn't start to clump. There we go. Sprinkle all around here. And then mix all of this in. So I would say that the best meals for dehydrating are spaghetti bolognese is probably the best. That one retains most of its flavour. Curry, that also retains quite a lot of its flavour. Chili con carne is quite good, that retains a lot of its flavour, and the kidney beans rehydrate okay. And then Thai, it loses most of its flavour, so especially things like the ginger. Whenever I dehydrate Thai food, what I actually then do is I just have like little sachets of ginger paste and things like that I can take with me, and that brings all of the flavour back. A little bit like what you get in a pot noodle when you have that little flavour sachet. So I think this is pretty much done now, but we've still got quite a while for the pasta to cook. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to swap them around just so that the pasta's on the hotter hob. Come on now, you bastard. There we go. And turn this back down. Have a little taste of this. Quite nice. I'm just going to add some more white wine to it, and I'm just going to evaporate that away. I'll do this toward the end, just so that the flavours stay in there a little bit better. Now what I'm going to do, and I do this most of the time when I cook it, I'm actually going to add some Scotch bonnet chilli sauce to the bolognese. I do think a little tiny bit of heat and zing to bolognese really kind of sets it off. So the pasta's all done now, so what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to drain it all and then give it a bit of a rinse, and then I'm going to mix both of these together in this massive pan. So I've poured it all into there, and I'm just going to give this a bit of a rinse now. Okay, good with that. Quite a lot of waste there. Okay. So I'm going to pop all of this back in the big pan. So what I'm going to do now, because I'm ready to mix them both together, at the very last minute, I'm going to put this tub of hard grated cheese in there. It'll start going like a little bit kind of sticky, so you want to do this at the very last part. Give that a nice little mix around. Ah, getting scolded. There we go. Let's put this back over here. This is all cooked now, so we don't actually need to do any further cooking. All we need to do now is just mix it all together. I actually didn't end up using the gravy granules because I think the OXO cubes did a pretty good job of thickening it up. And because we've drained the fat, it's not going to be quite as high calories as it could be. But I reckon probably around about 800 calories per serving, something like that. Not too bad at all. So it doesn't look the most appetizing, but it is fully fledged spaghetti bolognese. So that was 1 ladle full, and each rehydrated meal is roughly 2 ladles full. So as you can see, it's quite a substantial meal for while you're out on the hills. So this is my dehydrator. This is the Excalibur, and it's got 9 trays. So each tray has a little mesh or like a little overlay for when you're using sauces and things, and then you just slide it in. Now, most cheap dehydrators work by heating from the bottom upwards, but what that basically means is you've just got to constantly rearrange in order to get them to dehydrate evenly. The difference with the Excaliburs, these heat up from the back, so each of the 9 shelves all rehydrate at roughly the same time. You probably will need to kind of rotate them maybe once or twice, but generally speaking, what I do is I'll put this in, I'll go to bed, wake up in the morning, flip them round, and then let them rehydrate for about another 6 or 7 hours. So these are the pouches that I use to put the dehydrated meals in. There's like a little see-through thing there, which is quite handy, so you can see what it is that you've got. I'll put in the comments below what size this is. This is pretty much the standard size for dehydrated meals. What you may need to do is you may need to fill one of these full of wet food, just so that you can see how many ladles full it takes to fill it. Once you've done that, you know then that you put that same amount on each tray and you're good to go. Also what that does is, let's say that you fill it and you fill it to here, then you know that when you come to rehydrate it, that's where you need to fill your water to. So this is my ladle, an absolutely fantastic ladle as far as ladles go. And what I found is I need to put 2 ladles full on each of these for a rehydrated meal. You have to be careful not to make them too heaped. So there's 1 ladle, and then 2 ladle. And then all you do now is you just spread this around on each tray. So the aim here is that you want to use the full area of the tray, and you want to try not to have like kind of little heaps like that, because the heaps will take longer to dehydrate. So get it all nice and spread out. Okay, I'll do nicely, and then I'm going to bring this across and slot it in the top tray. Now, you don't get a massive amount of room, so you do need to make sure as well that you haven't stacked it too high, because it'll start coming off there. So as I said before, there are 9 of these trays, so I'm just going to go and put 2 ladles full on each tray. Oh, bring this over here. One ladle, 2 ladle. So this takes a little bit of time. It's quite therapeutic, to be honest, but once you've done it, it's done, which is all good. And you can see now why, if we'd have actually put like really thick chunks in here, they'd all be sticking up and they'd be catching, and take a lot longer to dehydrate, which is not what we want. Okay, on the second tray. Because you're dealing with meat, it's really important that you go above 65 degrees, because that's when basically bacteria starts to get killed. The last thing you would want would be for it to be under 65 degrees and actually have it as just like this amazing little breeding ground for those shitty little bacteria. Okay, I've got the last one here. and basically, I'll just show you now. Now basically there's a heating element at the back, and it's just blowing hot air through this way, and you can instantly feel that. It is really impressive how fast it does that. Well, basically this is going to be able to do all of these, and it's most likely going to take around about 14 hours to do fully. Okay, so it's the next morning and it's about 10 hours since I put all of this in. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to check on them and see how they're doing. Oh. So top layer is almost done. Now what you'll find is underneath will still be a little bit moist, so we do need to keep it in for longer. Now even though this does dehydrate much more evenly than other ones, what you will find is the bottom ones are usually not quite as dehydrated. So because it's been in now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the top one out and replace it with the bottom one, but I'm also going to rotate it. Oh. So if you've got like chunky bits, these will definitely not be dehydrated, so that in there. I could have done a better job of knocking that down. So I reckon we've probably got maybe another 4 hours, maybe 5, before this is done perfectly. What you don't want is you don't want there to be some moisture still, because when you break it all down and put it in its packet, that'll start like kind of rehydrating bits and bobs. It's not really good. It's not what you want. So this is really the only real maintenance that you need to do with one of these. As I say, with the cheaper ones that like kind of heat from the bottom upwards, you've got to do this every hour, maybe every 2 hours, and if you don't, it just doesn't help. The bottom one will dehydrate and the top ones just won't. And what also you find is all of the moisture from the bottom one kind of seeps into the top ones, and just causes them to never really ever dehydrate. And by the time the bottom one has dehydrated, the top ones aren't. By the time the top ones have dehydrated, the bottom one's just crisp. So these have been in now for about 15 hours, and I would imagine they're probably done. What you might find is on the underneath, if it's still a little tiny bit damp, what you might need to do is you might need to kind of carefully lift it up. It'll all be like kind of one piece now. And then, so you can see like the fat's still there, kind of, and it's still kind of liquidy, because that doesn't dehydrate. So if I turn this back around this way, on the underneath, if you see anything that's still kind of wet and not dehydrated, you might need to either put it back in this way around or break it up. This one is actually fine, so there's no problem with this at all. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to move them out of the way. Get yourself a little bowl, and then what I'm going to do is just going to snap this up into like little pieces like this. Be careful that it doesn't fly across the room. Okay, so we've got, what you need to be careful of as well is quite a lot of flavour that kind of gets left on here, so what I tend to do is kind of give it a bit of a rub like that, just so that you can get the remaining part out. And then what I'm going to do now is just going to kind of push down, just move this around so you can see there, hopefully you should be able to see. So I'm just going to push down and kind of break this up. There we go. And then once you've done that, you can put this back on the sheet. Put that over there. Grab one of your little packets. Bit of a pain to do this on your own, but and then you're going to create like a little funnel thing with this. And then okay, so once you've done that, let's see if I can show you now. So the dehydrated contents are up to around about here, and as I shown you earlier on, when you fill this, you're going to want to fill it up to around about here full of water, and that's going to be about right. So what I tend to do now is I'm going to close it from both sides. I'm not going to close it all the way, I'm going to leave a little tiny gap here, and the reason for that is so that I can get rid of the air. So I'm going to push down now, and the air is kind of blasting out of there. Allows me to make these as flat as possible. Once I'm happy with how flat it is, I can then go all the way across. Okay, so that's this now, and as you can see, it's really thin now. It takes up hardly any room. I think, let me just check. So if I just pop this down there and place this on top, 167 grams, so that's really light, and around about 800 calories I'd say. So the idea is you're going to do that for all 9, and then there's one last step which is optional but just makes things a bit safer. So I bought one of these from Amazon, I think they're about 20 quid, something like that. So basically what this allows you to do, it allows you to seal across the top there, which just gives you a double layer of protection. And I'll just show you now if you can see. There's like a little seal mark going along there, just above where the little rip is. So when you want to open this now, all you do is you just tear all the way down and we're good. So there you go, that's 1 out of 9. So anyway, that's it for today, just a little short bonus video. So if you've enjoyed it, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.